Hi, everyone. On behalf of Ardent Partners, I'd like to welcome you to our webinar on the future of procurement, apps, talent, and innovation, part of Ardent Partners' monthly webinar series. My name is Matt York, and I'll be moderating today's webinar. I'm a senior research analyst here at Ardent Partners and the editor of our daily media site, cporising.com, where I write about sourcing, procurement, and emerging business technologies like advanced analytics, blockchain digital ledgers, and cognitive technologies. Before we begin, let me take care of a little housekeeping. Now, to start, everyone listening in will receive a copy of today's presentation. I know that's a concern of everyone. We get this question a lot. Yes, you will get a copy of the presentation after the webinar, so rest assured. We have a highly interactive event planned for you today, and we welcome your participation. So please, if you've got any questions, feel free to submit them via the Q&A tab on the control panel, and we will try to work them into the Q&A part at the end of the webinar. We have a lot of great discussion ahead of us today. So if we don't get to your question, we'll follow up with you after the webinar, and we'll get you some answers. In the meantime, to view the webinar in full screen mode, just click View Menu and select Full Screen. If you experience technical issues during the event, you can call GoToWebinar Support at 1-805-617-7000 and provide the event ID, which is 710-409-347. And you can also send a message to me, and I'll try to assist you. So as I said, we've got an exciting webinar planned for you today. We're going to explore in great detail the future of procurement, like the versatility and power of applications, and the centrality and the continued evolution of talent, and the state of procurement-led innovation and how it's paving the way towards greater enterprise value. And we'll finish up with a summary, followed by some Q&A by our guests. Now, let me tell you a little bit about Ardent Partners. We're a research and advisory firm focused on defining and advancing the supply management strategies, processes, and technologies that drive business value and accelerate organizational transformation within the enterprise. Ardent Partners actively covers the supply management marketplace and produces research to help business decision makers understand, first and foremost, industry best practices and how to improve performance, and second, the technology landscape and how to identify the best fit solution or solutions, for your specific budget and requirements. Now, let me tell you a bit about our daily media site, CPO Rising. CPO Rising is the first independent site designed exclusively for chief procurement officers. If you like today's webinar, we encourage you to visit cporising.com for more insights, best practices, procurement and technology news, and thought leadership discussions. The site frequently features content from Ardent's premier analyst team with a focus across all areas of the supply management spectrum. So that includes strategic sourcing, analytics, contract management, financial management, and complex spend management. Speaking of CPO Rising, Ardent's annual Procurement Executive Symposium returns this year. On October 29 and 30, a select group of CPOs and other procurement leaders will come together once again in Boston for CPO Rising 2019. We are excited and honored to once again feature a world-class roster of procurement executives who share a passion for their work and a commitment to propel the profession forward. This powerful two-day lineup of global CPOs will be ready to help you prepare your procurement operation to face new challenges, execute critical strategies, and blaze a path to the future. We have some big announcements coming in March, so be sure to check out our event website, events.cporising.com for the latest updates. Ardent's monthly webinar series is an easy way for procurement, finance, and supply chain professionals to keep up on the latest trends in procurement and supply management. Every webinar, like today's webinar, is designed to deliver research, insights, and crisp, actionable recommendations from Ardent's analysts and other procurement experts. The 2019 calendar includes a series of great topics delivered during the last full week of each month. We encourage you to visit www cporising.com/webinars for more details and to pre-register. We'd like to thank our sponsor today, TradeShift, for making this event possible. Here's a little bit about the company. TradeShift drives supply chain innovation for the digitally connected economy. As a leader in supply chain payments and marketplaces, the company helps buyers and suppliers digitize all of their trade transactions, collaborate on every process, and connect with any supply chain app. More than 1.5 million companies across 190 countries trust TradeShift to process over $500 billion in transaction value, making it the largest global business network for buying and selling. Discover commerce for all at tradeshift.com. Now, let's meet today's speakers. Roy Anderson recently joined the TradeShift team as its new Chief Procurement and Digital Transformation Officer. His new position is a multifaceted role. One key emphasis is to optimize the use of the TradeShift network and applications inside the TradeShift environment. But another element of Roy's position is to act as an evangelist for the TradeShift network, as well as digital transformation within organizations and in the wider supply chain environment. Roy has held a number of key procurement leadership roles in financial and manufacturing organizations. Most recently, Roy was Executive Vice President at MetaProcure GoProcure, where he was responsible for procurement services operations, providing a full suite of enabling technologies addressing global transactional processing, strategic sourcing, spend analytics, and risk analysis. Before that, Roy was a CPO at State Street Bank and Vice President of Global Procurement at MetLife. Thanks for joining us today, Roy. Next up, we have Andrew Bartolini, who is the founder and chief research officer at Ardent Partners, and a globally recognized expert in sourcing, procurement, and supply management overall. He is an analyst who has spent the past 2 decades helping enterprises develop and execute strategies to achieve best-in-class performance within their procurement and finance departments. I'd like to welcome Andrew, who will now take it from here. Andrew?
Thanks, Matt. Hello and good day to everybody. I'm really excited to be joined by Roy Anderson, globally renowned CPO, but also excited to talk to him a little bit about, the second part of his title, Digital Transformation Officer. We're going to talk about the future of procurement, right? We've really sort of been thinking about this as, what are the 3 keys that are going to drive the profession to the next level of performance, right? We've been working at Ardent Partners now for 10 years, doing market research and engaging with procurement organizations and solution provider companies. And, as we start to look out over the next couple of years, right, we see a bright future. We see a bright future for the majority of procurement organizations, and there's certainly some things that can be done, in the short term to better prepare for that future. And so what we wanted to do today is to get people to start to, sort of think about the bigger picture, some of the larger opportunities, some of the things that are going to really be the transformational drivers, getting the procurement profession to, the next level of performance, right? To get it onto a higher trajectory. So normally, in these presentations, I like to start off with a little bit of our current research and provide some background as a jumping off point. Instead of doing that today, I'll note that we do have our 14th annual State of Procurement Survey, and that survey is live. And it would be great for those of you listening in if you could spend 10 or 15 minutes taking it. Those that do, get a free copy of the final report and the opportunity to contribute to the advancement of the profession. And when we send out the mailer with the slide link on it, we're going to get a little invitation there. So something to consider, but now I really want to dive in and start with, what one of the key drivers here, right, and that's apps, right, and that's technology. And, as we have looked out, over the, So I've been in the space for 20 years. Roy's been in the space a little bit longer. Procurement as a profession and as a business function, has gotten more sophisticated, right? It has advanced in a broad range of ways, and as we start to think about, the goals of the modern procurement organization and how they've morphed and shifted from, the more tactical aspects to the more strategic, the shift has moved away, from something that organizations are no longer solely focused on savings, right? I think that savings is certainly a key part of the procurement remit, and always will be, and probably always should be. But I think that over the past couple of years, most specifically, right, we've seen a more enlightened approach to the function, and that really does start at the top, right? I was at a conference this week and spoke to a couple of CEOs who were talking about the role that sourcing and procurement organizations play within their organizations, right, and within their companies. And these are large multi-billion-dollar companies. And while savings was a component, really, enabling the executive team to make decisions and to have those decisions, matched with on the execution side by operations, have it matched by finance, and have it matched by procurement, is something that is really something that we see is going to be sort of fundamental to the procurement function as we move forward, right? We've been talking about at Ardent Partners procurement agility for the past 5 or 6 years, and we do believe that, and I believe personally that agility is going to be the defining characteristic of best-in-class performance, of best-in-class procurement organizations, as we move forward. Certainly, speed of business continues to accelerate, and agility is needed because of the speed of business, because of the level of innovation that we see. And we're gonna talk a lot about a lot of the driving forces in business as a whole, and how many of those are now serving to make the role of procurement much more critical to business success and to business operations and to bottom line business results. Versatility as well. And so, if you start to think about, well, how are organizations, going to move from, the processes and the strategies and approaches that have worked well in the past, and how do they begin to rethink, and how do they begin to, take this newer approach to achieve these goals? And, we certainly have talked a lot about technology in our years, and technology, is going to, I go back to the state of procurement survey from a couple of years ago. If we were to go back, even no more than 5 or 6 years ago, technology was not necessarily a front and center or central strategy to a majority of CPOs, right? They were still, I think, much more focused on, getting talent into the organization, looking to sort of expand and develop more collaborative relationships. Again, those things are, can and will continue to be, vitally important to a procurement organization's success. But, technology, I think, finally is in part because I think that there's a new wave of CPOs that have come into the leadership roles of large and mid-sized procurement organizations. I think they understand that, they're, even the top performing procurement organizations have difficulty, getting an increased headcount year over year, and that the way to scale their operations, and that the way to scale their expertise, and the way to retain knowledge, is through technology. And so, over the past 20 years, right, the procurement function has seen this large transformation, and a lot of that has been driven by the process automation tools, the supply management technologies that have been adopted and that have enabled visibility, that have enabled procurement to move from a more tactical, reactive organization to something that is more proactive, that really does operate in a much more professional manner. But the role of technology, over the past decade, right? So sort of going back and forth, is this over the last 5 years, over the last 10 years, over the last 20 years? It doesn't really matter the time frame as much as the fact that the role of technology is changing. And when we start to think about digital transformation, the point is that these initiatives are no longer simply about driving efficiencies through process automation, right? The goal is to think about technology no longer as simply a process enabler, but to really think about it as the core process itself, and to utilize that as the starting point. We were just a few months ago on with Roy, and we were talking about some of the benefits from process automation and the intelligence dividend. But the role of technology is much more fundamental to procurement success today than it has been at any other time. I think though that for a technology to really become the process, right, there have to be certain attributes that have to take place, right? So for technology to become quote unquote the process, clearly you have to have broad, if not universal, adoption of the solutions, right? And what are the drivers of those, right? If you were to look back over the past couple of years, we've seen some pretty significant innovations in the supply management solution market. A lot of those innovations have not necessarily been on the feature functionality or adding that next bell or whistle to a solution. Really what it has been is in simplifying solutions and making them more usable, making them more intuitive, guiding the different users of the different technologies through a process that makes sense, so that even the occasional user can come in and understand what they need to do and accomplish their task and activity in an efficient way, and in a way that is sort of positive, a positive experience for the user. I think the solutions, as we start to think about the process and we start to think about the variations of processes that your sourcing teams follow, or even through the rec to PO process, right? I mean, there's some variability there in how people do their work, and so the solutions need to be able to accommodate some level of flexibility, right? I mean, you certainly still need to, from a process, follow the steps that need to be followed, and rather than check a box process compliance, make sure that the key activities are done and done well and done comprehensively. For technology to be the source to pay or source to settle process, you need seamless workflows, and really just utilizing the technologies to drive the process and be the process, is going to deliver significant benefits. But the solutions also have to be able to, be able to process data, to be able to help the users of the technologies begin to make smarter decisions. And so, Roy, you spent a lot of time on technology, and I'm sure you've got some thoughts here on whether how you drive adoption as a CPO, or what you're looking for when you're looking to bring technology into your organization.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks for bringing me in. So let's just talk about total adoption. The key issue that I've seen across a number of organizations, and my time doing a little bit of consulting with other companies, is they have the technology in place, and don't underestimate the amount of work it takes to get the ROI and business case to be able to drive the approval of using the technology. But adoption has become a real problem as people try to create the environment that allows people to want to use this tool set. Now, note, people are very difficult to change, and they need to be able to give a reason that change is valuable to them. It's very egocentric in that structure. So getting adoption is crucial. It requires the tool to have the level of usability, so people find it easy to use, and therefore they'll be more likely to use it. But what I have also found is that to have adoption, you have to have workflows that are in line with reality. Unfortunately, there's a lot of policies and procedures that are tied into workflow that actually slow the process down. And what I've always told my CFOs and my auditors is, don't worry about the people inside the tool, Worry about the people outside the tool, because those are the individuals that are probably getting themselves into trouble without even knowing it. So you need to be able to have policies and procedures that reduce the amount of workflow, that make it so that the decisions are faster and easier, and then the internal customer can trust that the tool set will get the job delivered more effectively. Now, we also talk about adoption internally. It's important to know that adoption has to also be done with your suppliers, that they have to accept the output of your tool set and be able to incorporate it directly into their models more efficiently and effectively. And if we really want to be a supply chain solution, that we have to be able to have that process go deeper than just to our first level supplier, but how does that process in detail get deeper into the supply chain? And that's when it becomes really fun, as we start getting the IoT, the Internet of Things, tied in, the blockchain concepts, which then allows you to be able to connect the dots between your supplier, all the way through the logistics process, into the quality analysis process, back into your solutions, and then also out to your final customer. Because that end-to-end solution is what's going to drive the next level of data intelligence, and then the analytics that go with that. So you may think that your process is perfect, but you have no clue that the process and the things you're doing is causing problems either upstream or downstream that you have to fix. So this process is much bigger than just your internal customer and internal team, much wider. The amount of data required is significantly greater, and therefore you have to think much bigger, much outside the box, to be able to really drive the value proposition as to what you're presenting, Andrew.
Yeah, no, I mean that's great commentary, right? So I did a fair before I became an analyst, and been an analyst now, I guess, for about 14 years. But before that, I did a fair amount of systems implementation work, and sort of the comment that you had there about getting the right workflows and getting streamlined workflows, into the system. I'm reminded I worked at a at a large oil and energy company, and they had their source to settle process was diagrammed out on. They had to go to a special printer because the process was so complex and so many steps that it couldn't be printed on a normal printer. And they then spent about 2 years mapping that process to the solution suite. And no surprise, 2-3 years after that, they had barely moved the needle. But I think also great insight that what you're working on so often is there's this internal focus, right, and trying to ensure that the voice of the customer and the internal customer is heard in as those workflows are designed. But the source to settle solutions are very unique from the standpoint that for these to be successful, it requires third parties to be active and high active users and to do this total adoption for the solutions to pay off and for them to be successful. But great insights there, Roy.
Excellent, thank you. So let's just jump into apps, why don't we? And if we go to the next slide, I believe the future of supply chain, the future of procurement is on the apps, as the apps are going to make a difference in how we do business. So yesterday, we were talking about, do we have requisitioning and contracts and sourcing, and how do I connect those together? And then we'd create a stack solution to be able to make sure that they talk to each other. On the next slide, as we go into the apps making the difference, understand that apps are the reality of every individual today, and they are certainly the reality of all our future workers and clients tomorrow. Now, the difference between an apps and these modules and these connected stack-based solutions, though they are wonderful, they do some incredible work, they are not user-centric. They are procurement or IT-centric. And when you have a procurement-centric model, it basically creates an environment where you have a hammer called your P2P tool, and every person around you is a nail. So you start hitting them with that same P2P tool. And I talk to the facilities people, and they tell me, Roy, you have to understand, I'm talking energy utilization. I'm talking facility usage. I'm talking moves, adds, and changes inside the facility. How do I best get the most productivity out of people on my space planning on a global basis? My interaction with my suppliers does not fit into what your requisition looks like. And then you talk to the advertising people, and they say, Roy, we're talking creativity. This is not the same thing. It's not widgets and nails and inventory. This is about designing a new solution set and marketing that type of program. We don't fit into your model. And the engineering people are going, Roy, we're talking about specifications. We're talking about deep dive reviews. Those types of requirements don't meet what you're trying to do. And it came clear to me that the requisitioning tool that is procurement or IT centric does not fit the mold. An example I use is that when you have your applications on your phone, you'll realize that the applications on the facilities manager phone are totally different than the applications that are on the advertising person's phone or the engineer's phone. Not only is it different inside those roles, the applications that you're dealing with are different inside of various cultures. So, for example, the facilities person in China has a different set of applications than the facilities person that's in Spain or Mexico or the United States. And then add to that, I bet there's not a 25-year-old that has applications on their phone that are similar to a 55-year-old. So you not only have cultural changes in your apps and role changes in your apps, but you also have age different changes in your applications. And that's when it becomes customer centric. So as we build out at TradeShift an application layer, we see the value of having applications that meet the customer's requirements to make it easy for them to be able to utilize the tool set. So therefore getting much higher usability and the flexibility that as the apps become old or outdated or they don't meet your requirements any longer, there'll be a new set of applications that you can then plug into the program. I believe that applications are going to radically change the way procurement does their business. So let's move to the next slide. So now you have the ability to curate a solution set that meets your internal customers' expectations. So as a supply chain person, you want to create a wealth of content, content that in terms of products, content in terms of services, and content in terms of how you reach out to that services and content. And those will become the applications. So as you build it out, you're going to realize that the applications that are best suited for your group in the United States for facilities is going to be a different configuration of applications than you would need for your agency group. That's the fun part. You're going to be able to build something that is going to be very user-centric in this model, not only for just the user, but think about the entire flow of activity. You can start to create apps that are tied into your facilities manager role that is a third party, that links more effectively to your internal customer that is requesting the move going forward, or that ties into your executive that's looking to open up new office space in a new marketplace. That these applications can then pull in data from third parties that have better understanding of what's going on in that new market, a new country, a new location, a new tax region. All those become third-party data elements that can be absorbed into the application model to be able to deliver better digital detail for the internal customer. The fun part is you can actually start building your own applications that make it specific to you because you have a unique environment. So not only do you have your own set of applications and you have third-party applications, we believe that there's going to be groups of applications that are going to sit on top to be able to drive artificial intelligence and be able to create robotic process automation in that structure, and then be able to aggregate data more effectively to deliver additional solutions. So if you look at the consumer space, you have all these apps in order to sell products and services, and then you have apps on top of it that aggregate those products and services to give you a better look on a global scale. So those apps that work on top of apps become just another level of value to the structure. So think of it as a curation of the applications to be able to add value to your internal customer. Let's go to the next slide. Now, as you build out applications, think of a marketplace. So one of the trade shift environments is to build a marketplace that has content and services that are very specific to the industry or the group you're in. We have the ability to be able to create, let's call it a retail marketplace, where products and suppliers and applications that are more specific to the retail environment versus the healthcare environment versus the financial services environment. So we want to build up those marketplaces filled with unique applications to support that area. And then companies can step into that and be able to curate from that structure. We also believe that there's going to be marketplaces that are going to be very specific to a particular type of work. So let's think of recycling. So I was talking to the producer of vegetables out in Europe. They produce a third of the vegetables for the European market. And their concern was 20 to 40% of everything they produce gets thrown away. So there's an enormous amount of food that if we could build a marketplace of people that could recognize where food is, the pickup services, the reprocessing services and the sales as a separate marketplace filled with applications that support that marketplace could actually tie into your restaurant programs, your wholesale distribution programs, your grocery chains, and those would be marketplaces of applications and services to be able to enhance your play. So that could be marketplaces of precious metal recycling, IT recycling, as well as energy. Maybe there's a marketplace of energy, and we'll have applications that are specific to there. My reason for explaining this is to be able to say the potential is unlimited. Just as when the first smartphones were delivered and there were 3 or 4 applications, did anyone anticipate that there'd be actually 1 million applications sitting in the iPhone or Google store? That is the potential for B2B type of applications, because the B2B market is 7 times the size of the B2C market. So we'll create applications that are about collaboration, applications that help you drive your business more effectively, or applications that will drive commercialization of the process on a greater scale. Let's touch on the next slide. This just is a snippet of the types of applications that are now available in the store. So it ties together everything from your upfront sales activity to integration to other technologies to, on the back end, supply chain financing or dynamic discounting opportunities. So we have applications in there that determine company checks, or know your supplier type of solutions, and OFAC checks. We have sustainability applications or risk management applications, and then that's going to grow as we develop logistics solutions, and then the standard things like a VMS type of application for your temp labor and SOW work. I'm working now with companies that are doing case management apps for the legal services, agency creative applications, and along with the standard things such as contracts, sourcing, requisitioning, and that. And of course, I call out for Justin Dillon and his Freedom application. This is an application that looks at your supplier base and says, do you have forced labor potential in your supply base, so that you can take a more aggressive action on eliminating that from your entire program. So these types of applications cover specific activities for your internal customer, all the way up to a holistic view of your supply chain, which I think is really, really cool. So the next slide talks a little bit about apps being a force multiplier. If you now start to use applications to get work done, and then you realize I have a bandwidth problem, I actually need a third party that's going to be able to give me a buyer's desk or a sourcing desk. We're going to have applications that provide task workers for that space. So now, as a CPO, you can start looking at the work that's being done and making a better understanding of the work that should be done by third parties, the work that can be done through the applications with your BPO partners or with your facilities outsource partners going forward, or task workers that have specific skills that can support your activity. This, I believe, is going to lower the total cost of doing business, but allow you to have all the resources you need as a CPO to get the work done. As I've always told my team, is the work's got to be done, but it doesn't have to be done by you. You have suppliers, you have technology, you have third parties. The idea is to be more of a conductor in a concert and be able to get the work done on a more holistic basis. So let's go to the next slide. I also see this as a future-proof platform. We are all experienced with the idea of taking time to get a tool in place and then the time it takes to get it rolled out effectively. And by the time you've gone that far, your tool is actually old. So it's not the right tool any longer. So the technologies have changed, the people have changed, the opportunities have changed. So as a CPO, I'm trying to look 3 and 4 years out to say, well, what's the tool that's going to be able to live in that new environment? Applications are much easier to update and to pull out and plug in the next generation application. So it's not as much an IT play here as it's a value of being able to put a new app on your phone. You don't need IT to put that in, and love IT, but this is not where their value is. The value in the supply chain is to be able to constantly update your applications that are more specific to your requirements as you are today in reality, and then be able to move you forward over the next 12 to 24 months. So therefore, by doing applications, you've actually future-proofed your entire solution. So I see apps as a huge play here, Andrew.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I mean, that's obviously why we have it as one of the three keys. I think one of the points I always think about when I think about apps, right? Or I guess there's a couple, and I think you hit upon all of them. But one, right? So we still have a challenge of adoption, right? We were just talking yesterday, right? We were sort of, thinking about what we were going to talk about today. We did a sidebar. We started talking about e-sourcing and how we were both surprised that there's just not universal adoption because the solutions are so powerful and they're so dynamic and they really can model almost every type of offline negotiation process. And then, you talk to these large, multi-billion-dollar companies that have billions of dollars in spend, and they think a successful year is to run 40 e-sourcing events and 15 reverse auctions. They're not applying the technology really as well as they could. If you start to move those processes to an app, well, I think one of the challenges is that there's some complexity still. Even in the solutions that are highly usable, when you get to these technologies built into an app and you're dealing with it on your smartphone, you're dealing with it on your smart device, they have to be brutally simplified, and they have to be a couple clicks and a point and enter, and whatever the activity is enabled. So I think that's a really powerful opportunity for these apps. And then of course, right? I mean, you just showed the list of all the third parties there, all the third party applications, right? The ability for specialists to bring their unique technology and their unique expertise, and for you in the procurement organization to bring that into your operation, into your process, is greatly enabled by the platform and app technology model, and it really is very exciting.
Yeah, and Andrew, you mentioned the brutally simplified. When a person writes software, they have to say, well, who's the audience? And then they have to say, well, for my tool to be utilized enough, I've got to make it a broader, wider scope. So therefore, I'm dealing with people that are working in raw materials as much as I'm dealing with drug manufacturers, as much as I'm dealing with consultants. And you start to realize the tool gets so broad that it's very powerful, very good, but it doesn't necessarily hit the specific user-centric requirement, because the people that want to use it, as you said, 2 clicks. I think about the first time we were trying to do pictures in the original smartphones and then be able to put that picture and get it sent to someone. Well, today you have an app that's literally the picture click and send is 2 clicks and it's done. It's made it so easy that pictures are being sent all over the world, that texts are being sent all over the world, that music is being shared across the world. That's the type of simplicity that will make the sourcing applications, because they have to hit a specific user target rather than hundreds of user targets. So I see
Right.
that as being the driver.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other part of that is that we have a workforce now that has grown up or will soon have only grown up with smart devices and with apps, and the concept of web-based applications, I think easily accommodated, but you've got a workforce that's going to be primed to adopt and use these apps and to push that marketplace forward. So key number two, right? The future of procurement, right, is talent, and as much as we may talk about the importance of technology or getting the right processes, having the right strategic relationships within the organization, the right visibility, all of those things are important. But if you don't have the right team on the bus, you're not going to get very far. And as the baby boomer procurement leaders start to head off into the sunset, there really is a new breed of CPO that is coming to bear. We were really thrilled at last year's CPO Rising Summit to have a couple of these new leaders with some innovative ideas and some fresh approaches to honestly some of the traditional challenges. And it's as we start to look at the future of procurement, how CPOs and how procurement leaders, get the most out of their talent and get the most out of their resources, is really going to define the success or failure of that organization. Now, I'm going to borrow a few slides from Chris Dwyer, who's our VP of Research focused on contingent workforce and the future of work. And what we've seen, we've talked about agility, and I've talked about it as really being a defining characteristic of best-in-class procurement departments. It is at the highest levels of the enterprise, in your companies, it's also a desired state, and so you have to start to think about how are you going to be best equipped to support decisions and changing decisions, and decisions that and directions of the business that are changing in a much more rapid fashion than before. How are you able to meet the requirements of the business today, but also be thinking a couple steps ahead so that in the next 2 to 3 years, as your company introduces new products and services or changes its revenue model or enters new markets, how are you positioned to be there to support them and to play a key role? To become an agile organization, it really does start with your people. Our research has shown that we really have. We're now operating in a new world of work. There's any number of metrics, I think, that can account for this or that can communicate the thought, right? So, our research at Ardent Partners shows that roughly 40% of all workers that are on site today are not full-time employees of that company, right? They are they're outsourced workers, they're consultants, they're independent contractors, they're temps, and this has been a major shift, right? I think for those of you, that are under 35 listening in today, the number of employers that you're going to have throughout your career is, going to be 3, 4, maybe even 5 times as many as the people that are leaving the workforce have had in their careers. And everything has become much more fluid, and I think there has been this major shift. And so what does the procurement organization, what do procurement leaders need to be doing to better manage this shift and navigate going forward in this new world of work? And I think one, the approach to your work really has to change, right? It requires transformational thinking, where you're no longer certainly, I think, when you look at some of the most successful procurement organizations and how they've gotten to where they are, there has been a command and control type of approach that's been taken, where we're going to set the policies and we're going to ensure that everybody follows those policies. That has gotten those are the organizations that have gotten higher user adoption. Those that have gotten higher throughput through the solutions. Those are the ones that have placed more spend under management. All very important, but I think that there needs to be a shift now in the way that procurement engages with the business, and really focusing less on some of those compliance metrics and more on what are the specific goals, or what are the right business outcomes, and to start to think about as you start to adopt this more transformational thinking, how you leverage the talent that you have, and the access to talent that you have, also needs to shift. We'll talk in a slide or two about the agile workforce, but one of the CPOs in our research, year in and year out, one of the top challenges for CPOs, particularly for those that are working in major U.S. cities where the job markets are highly competitive, it's finding and retaining talent, right? Talk to any number of CPOs. I was just actually talking last week to a CPO in New York City, and he's essentially given up on trying to find people with sourcing and procurement experience, and he's just looking for the best athletes that are out there. Our comments sort of shifted, and I said, well, there's been a major change in the way that companies are thinking about their talent, and part of this is shown in that 40% number, right? Organizations are tapping into non-FTEs, right? So they're tapping into more consultants. They're leveraging independent contractors. They're finding their contingent labor, the contingent workforce, and what they're finding is that there are all of these talent pools that are out there that have great talent, and if they can tap into those pools and bring that talent into the organization, they may be paying a higher price in the short term, but they're generally getting a higher level of quality, and it's a variable cost, right? These can be more project-based engagements. It's sort of part of this shift, and this is a continuum, right? So we don't expect that in 2 to 3 years, only 20% of the workforce will be full time, right? I mean, you need to have people that are holding down the fort and driving the organization forward. But as you start to think about how do you staff your projects and how do you accomplish the goals and objectives that you need to do, this year and next year, only going to LinkedIn and putting out we're hiring is one approach, but I think that organizations and the more progressive organizations are thinking about their talent and taking more of a diverse or portfolio approach to this, right? Finding the different talent. Yeah. So Roy, you've got some comments here, I'm sure.
Yeah, I do. Thanks, Andrew. I just want to, as a CPO, one of my most important roles was to be able to lay out the vision for the organization so they could see as employees and as team members where they could grow to develop. Many people felt, I don't necessarily have the skills, or is there any work? If you automate the structure and get rid of my job, what do I do next? There is so much work to be done at a higher level that ties into this artificial intelligence and machine learning and multiple applications that get down to the user-centric model. That is new work that's never been done before. So I tell CPOs a few things. One, do a time study on your current team, because you're going to be amazed at how much of their time is still done transactionally. So you still have work to eliminate the transaction so you can free them up to do the new work. Two, show them the vision of what the new procurement group is going to look like. A procurement group that is app driven, that has marketplaces built in, where the work is being done based upon innovation and collaboration with your internal customers versus the work that is being done today. Three, the most important hire that you do is the very next hire, because everyone in your organization is looking at the people you're hiring. And when you hire the person that is more driven towards the innovation and collaboration and not towards transactional or even sourcing activity, that it highlights the fact that that's the type of talent you want them to become. going forward. Those are some specific actions you as a CPO can provide. Thanks, Andrew.
Right. And so with the changing workforce, right, as the talent and how you're engaging that talent changes, their expectations change too. And so you have to be accommodating to that, right? I mean, so one, there's, a lot written about, sort of the generational, demands of the younger workforce, whether that's situational or, sort of the characteristics of a generation. To me, it doesn't really matter, right? What you have now, though, are the experience and how they're onboarded and how they're engaged and how they're encouraged and I guess taken through the process becomes much more important. And so, what are some of the top strategies for enhancing the talent experience? I think as you start to look at the diversity of worker types within your organization, you have to be able to embrace all of those and find value in each worker type. So whether they're a temp just in for 2 weeks, or they're an independent contractor, or they're, a managed service on-site worker, you've got to, understand that, you've got to engage with them, right? Because, they're now performing more and more critical activities for your organization. You need to be able to empower individuals to make decisions and push a lot of that down, right? So, I mean, at some level, what we're talking about is a decentralized talent grouping of talent. To follow that model, you've got to push the decision making down, and you need to provide a positive work-life balance and invest in employee wellness, right? I think that the always on employee, right? I mean, that takes a toll. And so, particularly in times where, the war for talent is high, the competition for talent is extremely high, you have to be much more accommodating. I talked a little bit about the agile workforce and what this is and what organizations are striving to accomplish. Talk about sort of the change or the changing face of the different worker types that are now staffing your procurement organizations, or that they will soon in the future. How you engage with them needs to be very different. What you're looking to for them to do and deliver, and how you're evaluating them, needs to change. And having a better understanding of the cost implications and where and how you're finding those resources all become vitally important. And so I've got some time here, and I want to don't want to give it short shrift, but the third key to the future of procurement is innovation. And from my perspective, innovation pervades all areas of our lives, right? I mean, they just keep making things better and better. I mean, there's any number of proof points. You can look around your offices, you can look around your car, you can look around the devices that you have, how you access media, how you communicate, how you collaborate. I mean, fantastic innovation. And this innovation is happening in the consumer market. It's most definitely happening in the supply markets. And when I talk about innovation, I often like to use this quote by Bill Joy, and I labeled it Joy's Law about a decade ago. Bill Joy was one of the co-founder of Sun Microsystems, a company that played as big a role in sort of the launch and early sort of acceleration of the internet, through the hardware that his company provided, and that enabled the internet to grow as quickly as it did in the early days. Hugely innovative company, co-founder, brilliant guy. He understood even back then that his company didn't corner the market on innovation. That innovation was going to happen, and it was going to happen outside the four walls of his company. I love the quote because this also means that this is going to put a lot of responsibility on procurement to find that innovation, because one of the key areas and sources is your supply chain and the supply markets. Now, we look at some of the major business trends since 2000. All of these, in sum, are really, adding up to an amazing period of innovation, right? You now have global competition. You have technology and communication advances that have radically transformed how companies and B2B organizations communicate with each other, how they can collaborate. Certainly the speed of business continues to accelerate, and the apps market would be a great example of specialization, right? You now have a small group of very bright technologists can develop an app and get that out to market, in a short period of time. So the hurdles to innovation have lowered dramatically as well. All of this really, means that, innovation in the supply markets, have a greater impact on your business and your company than at any other time, or your suppliers and their performance more specifically, have a more direct impact on your company's revenues, on the quality of your products and services, and on your brand in the marketplace. Now, when you look at how enterprises, really, find, identify, manage and harvest innovation. And we've worked with a couple of different companies in different industries, but the approaches that they take, they generally fall into three general areas. And so the first is, to be an innovative company, you attract, the big brain people, the guys with the people, the men and women with the ideas that are going to, be, really drive the innovation, whether it's game changing or incremental. Opportunity number two, build, buy, or source, right? I think that, when you start to look at, an age where, your best suppliers are no longer right down the street, there's this extraordinary opportunity for procurement to, analyze and better understand, where these pockets of innovation exist. There's any number of metrics here that would show that, market leadership and incumbency, in any specific supply market is much harder to hold on to. And that, one of the things I always say is that if your supply base today looks very, very similar to what it looked like 10 years ago, that's probably a red flag, and that you're missing some opportunities to improve the quality of your supply. And then, the third would be to partner. And the great thing about all of these specific innovation strategies or models is that procurement can play a major role in each approach. And so, you look at, nurturing internal innovation, right? And how do you develop an innovation-ready culture within the procurement department? And Roy, I mean, you spent a lot of time on the operational side doing this.
Oh, absolutely. So just real quickly, the key element is innovation is sensitive. It's shy. And people that are innovative need to be given the benefit that you'll support them, that you'll reward innovative actions. And note, innovations mean failure. You're not going to innovate every time and hit a home run. There are going to be times that it doesn't work. So you have to fail fast and then protect those that dare to innovate. Because if they don't feel protected, they'll leave. So all your innovation goes with you. So one, make it feel real to them, reward them for being innovative, understand failure is a part of it. So understand the failure and get rid of it, and then move on and protect those people that are innovative because they're valuable.
I'd say absolutely. And I think that, another important thing to note here is that the companies that really that are successful in driving innovation in their products and services, right? So we're talking about, innovation on the front end of the business. Most of those innovations are incremental, but the companies that, are successful in doing this have a deliberate strategy, right? They're communicating within the organization. They are setting goals and objectives. They are working with their suppliers and with their partners, right? The other sort of major opportunity here, and the one that I see is really, the thing that's going to keep procurement most central to business operations, and that is harvesting supplier innovation, right? And so, there needs to be a change in the mindset, right, of the traditional sort of net sum negotiation, right? So we're going to squeeze our suppliers, and we're going to get, the most value out of them. When you go through those types of negotiations, it's very hard to then turn around and then suggest that suppliers should, invest in your business, become better partners. So there needs to be a change in the mindset. I think it starts with communication and information sharing. Certainly, your approach with different suppliers is, will necessarily be differentiated, and you don't need to be highly collaborative partners with all of your suppliers, but those that are the most strategic and those that are have the greatest opportunity to impact your own company's performance, need to be treated differently, right? I mean, are there innovation incentives that you can develop and communicate, and so you can get a truly vested partner in your supplier. Again, what we've seen for the most successful procurement organizations is that they have a formal innovation program. That the program is typically managed outside of the procurement department. It's not necessarily managed solely by the procurement department. There's usually a cross-functional innovation team that is there to help vet the innovations or potential innovations that have been identified by procurement in the supply chain, and then that team helps shepherd that and guide that through the organization. But fantastic opportunities, and it really does start with the fact that the view of suppliers must evolve. And we really have to start thinking of suppliers as one of your organization's greatest assets. So as we look out to the future of procurement, right? So leave you with three keys. I think absolutely the future of procurement is bright and exciting. Agility, speed, and innovation, definitely key differentiators. Three primary drivers and the three takeaways in the three areas for you to focus on, now, procurement technology apps, right? The simplification, the diversification, the ease of getting these onto your, into the user's hands, very powerful. Who those users are, the changing face of that, you need to start thinking about, how you get your work done and who are the right workers to do that work. And then third, focus on innovation, right? Again, most innovations are incremental. They're not these game-changing overnight innovations. And so you've got to be, very focused on that, setting goals and objectives, and really developing a strategy so that you can, identify and ultimately harvest and bring innovation through your organization. So, Roy, I don't know if you got any final thoughts. I don't think that we have time for questions.
No, that's. I think we covered a lot, Andrew.
All right. Well, great. So I'd like to thank everybody for listening in today. Those of you that did ask questions, we will respond back to you in the next day or so. The slides of this presentation will be, emailed out to you, and a recording will be available in the near term from TradeShift. I'd like to thank Roy for, great discussion today, and Matt as well. So thanks, everybody, and we'll hope to see you next month at the next webinar in the series. So thanks again.